I am Carinne,
And I'm Andrew.
and we are the new Botanist. Today we decided to go for a slightly more unusual plant. So Andrew, we're talking about the Madagascar palm. What can you tell us about it and what is unusual about it?
In past episodes, we've been covering quite iconic houseplants, and this one in particular is very unusual and it's really easy to look after. And I wanted to bring it up especially because it's just so alien-like. So this Madagascar palm is also known as Pachypodium lamara, and it's a deciduous succulent slash small tree. So this plant is very unusual. So it has quite a thick stem with long thorns, and it's sort of beautiful patterning on. So it looks like a big cactus, but it has deciduous long leaves growing from the top and going down. So the leaves drop off in winter and then they grow back again. So it's like a weird mix of a cactus, succulent, and tropical plant. But as the name suggests, this plant is solely from the island of Madagascar, and it's just weird in a good way. And I have to recommend it.
Well, you showed it to me. It is a very odd mixture. It's like two things smashed together to make one thing, and it's very interesting. So, given the sort of different nature of it, like that cactus mixed with a deciduous plant, how do you actually look after it? Because I would have thought that the deciduousness of the plant needs more water, whereas the cactus bit doesn't need any water.
It's a very odd mixture, but Madagascar is home to a lot of unique plants. It's very unusual, but it's an island, so it would develop lots of unusual things. But believe it or not, this house plant is very easy to look after. You treat it like a cactus that wants water all the time, which sounds really bizarre. It really prefers direct sunlight. Indirect, it'll be happy. It probably needs watering at least once a week in the winter, and it could be every other day in the summer. So, like with cacti, they like to take as much water up as possible because it downpours, and then they store that water into their thick stem. And these plants can grow pretty fast in ideal conditions, about 30 centimeters per year, or about a ruler's length.
Wow, per year.
Yes, in ideal conditions, and my one certainly has grown that.
It has yours has grown 30 centimeters, so you're providing it with ideal conditions. That's amazing.
Or at least one of my houseplants, yes.
So, in terms of its roots, and I mean, in lots of episodes, we've talked about, how to split any kind of plant to try and create more. Do you know anything about how to do that with this plant?
Well, unfortunately, this plant, you can't do any of that. There's no taking cuttings or root cuttings. When you get one plant, that is it. It's a shame that they're not more common as a house plant, but I suppose it's harder to find. So you have to go to nurseries. Maybe the odd supermarket might have it, but it is harder to find compared to the iconic ones that we've been discussing.
So it's deciduous, so that means it loses its leaves in the winter. Does it lose all its leaves?
No, so it depends on the winter. If it's a harsh winter, it'll lose the majority. Most of the time, especially in the houses, it will keep a lot of its leaves, but usually from the bottom it'll die off and then new leaves will sprout off. So just pick the ones that go a bit dry in appearance, but it's perfectly normal for most of the leaves to come off and then grow back.
Maybe you don't know this yet because I don't know how long you've had this plant, but does it, because it grows quickly, as you say, does it need regular repotting?
So I bought the plant for a remarkable price, very low. It was about 5 centimeters, and now it's just below 30 centimeters. And I had it for 2 years, so it's maybe not in ideal conditions, and I haven't repotted it as much as I should have. But this plant will need repotting at least in ideal conditions once a year. Maybe twice a year. It really depends on the conditions, of course, and you can usually tell because the roots of this plant are really thick, so they will distend the plastic pot very quickly, and that's when you need to repot it. Even in winter, if it's distended, you need to repot.
Given the speed of its growth, how How tall do they grow?
In the wild, and I know in several botanical gardens, in the greenhouses I've seen, they can grow up to 4.5, 5 meters. And they are really thick stems, up to 60 centimeters wide at the furthest point. And they tend to lose all the leaves apart from a little sprout at the top. So it almost looks like a pineapple, a very spiky pineapple.
That's so cool. Although I guess you might need a bigger house. In terms of things that can go wrong with them, what have you got any idea?
So they're very disease resistant. So you've probably got no issues there. They're very sort of tough, essentially, to watering. So if you forget to water it, it won't be happy, but it won't suddenly die. They don't really need a lot of nutrients. It is a very tolerant plant. But recently, my one suffered an accident. So it was on the windowsill, and the curtain, because of its long spikes, got caught in the curtain and it was knocked to the floor. An awe of panic, because it's such an unusual plant, and I don't know where to find them at the moment near me. The spikes had actually penetrated through the stem. It bleeds because it contains so much water. If you cut a cactus, it'll bleed. Not blood, but the liquid water that it holds. And it's obviously shredded some of the leaves, damaged some of the lower ones that hit the floor. And the first thing to do is not panic, although it's very hard to say. Lift it up and assess the damage. If the leaves are bent, broken, it's not good, but it'll be fine. If the stem is completely disintegrated, there's no hope, the big thick stem. But luckily, the thorns hadn't done too much damage. So I repotted it, said my apologies to it, watered it, left it, and it's all right now. The leaves are still a bit shredded, but it'll grow back again.
So just going back a bit about when we were talking about trying to propagate this plant, which clearly just isn't possible. How do they reproduce?
They reproduce by seed, typically, and obviously that's very difficult to do because we're not in Madagascar, so we're not in the ideal conditions. But the nurseries, the growers can do it quite well, and maybe that contributes to why it's relatively hard to find. I mean, I don't know why. It's such a gorgeous plant, and when you have the seeds, you can grow thousands of these things. But it usually grows by seed, and unfortunately, cuttings they're not really an option with this plant.
So will you try to grow one from seed? Does your plant already give seeds, and have you tried growing one?
It's very unlikely that these plants will flower because it's not the ideal conditions. If it does flower, you're very lucky. So I'm just quite content growing it up to 4 or 5 meters in the bedroom or hallway or somewhere, getting pricked by its thorns as I walk by, but I won't be reproducing it.
Is there anything else that we want to say about it? I mean, it sounds like it's a super easy plant, and it's a shame that it's so difficult to get to, because it feels like anyone interested in having plants that are easy to look after, this seems like an ideal plant.
It is an ideal plant. It is gorgeous. But at the moment, maybe because not many people know about it, so it's not popular, nursery growers aren't really going to produce plants that nobody really wants to ask for. So if you are interested, go to your local nursery and demand for them. And then when they know there's a demand for it, they'll grow more.
Fantastic. So I guess given that people won't really know what they look like, we'll put a picture on the website again and go and have a look there.
Awe in its beauty.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you will join us again next time for more tips and tricks on how not to kill your plants.
If you'd like us to cover a specific plant or have any other questions, you can get in touch via botanicaldoctor.co.uk.